NC State football is working its way through the season, but today we're talking NC State basketball here at Inside Pack Sports on YouTube. If you haven't done so yet, please subscribe to the channel at Inside Pack Sports on YouTube. Also, check out the website, www.insidepacksports.com, for the latest on NC State athletics. Let's get into it. I've got Jake McSwain with me today. And Jake, talking NC State basketball, starting lineup for NC State. Season openers a couple weeks out. So let's begin. I think this is going to be a test for us, because early in the year when we started talking NC State basketball, we thought we had a good feel for what NC State would have from a starting lineup perspective. But it feels like Will Wade, he kept adding ingredients to the pot, Jake. Right? He kept adding a bunch of different ingredients. And now, I don't know. I think this might be tough.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of different positions that you can look at. And I think early in the process, we were like, well, this is definitely going to be this guy's role, and this is definitely going to be this guy's role. But then as they just continued to add more talent, it's become a situation where I think you're going to have a lot of competition. And so I'm interested for your perspective on this as we start to look at a starting lineup for the beginning part of the year. Like, how confident are we that what we see at the beginning of the year holds throughout? You know what I mean? I think you see several iterations as the year goes on and guys getting cracks at a different type of job.
Oh, I love it. I think that's exactly what you're going to have. You don't have, in my opinion, and I think this will be the easy way to start with it, is I would label it, you have Darrion Williams and everybody else. And I think even with Darrion Williams, there's a caveat of how you want to use him, where you want to play him, and that's built around what else you add to that starting lineup. But I'm with you. I think at point guard, you've got multiple options to where maybe whoever begins at the beginning of the season, it might be a different starter by the end. The 5 position, the wing, the 2 guard position is a total unknown in terms of a projected starter. So I think it starts with Darrion Williams, and you're definitely going to see this lineup probably morph throughout the year. And it could be a hot hand approach. It could be who's playing well over a given couple of weeks, who shows something, and it might, for fans, I think at times, Jake, it might be a little, I guess, kind of up and down in terms of the rotation, and maybe nothing set in stone. But when you put a lineup like this together where you have so many options, you're not going to bat 1,000 as a head coach right out the gate, right? You're not going to know right away what button to push, what lineup to go with, who's my point guard. You're not going to know that. It's going to take some time to figure it out. And the key is to have one set by the time you get to crunch time, which we all know is March.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, like I said, it's not going to shock me if the starting lineup on night one looks completely different from the time we get to March. And I think there's several guys who could take leaps. But I do think, as we're talking today's subject of the game one starting lineup, I think there are some assumptions you can make based off what's an easy decision, like the easier decision for a coach to make, right? Like guys that you trust, like guys that you can trot out there night one and kind of know what to expect from them. So I'm going to be curious, James, let's start this off. What do you think going into game one or the exhibition one a couple weeks away? What do you think that starting lineup is going to look like?
Man, it's tough. Look, Darrion Williams is in it.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, he's the obvious answer here for me. I mean, I think outside of him, you've got complete questions in terms of starters. The question I have with Williams is that the 3 or is it at the 4?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's kind of going to decide, I think, some of the other things, because I think if you play him at the 4, maybe you're more likely to see a Terrence Arceneaux in the lineup. But if you play him at the 3, maybe you're more likely to see a Jerry Ding or a Musa Sanya in the lineup. So for me, though, I think coming out the gate with what NC State has invested into this roster and maybe their initial outlook, I think you see him at the 4 to begin the year in the starting lineup. And that's going to open the door to get Terrence Arceneaux in at the 3. I would go with Ven-Allen Lubin at the 5, simply because he's been here and I think they feel comfortable with him. And then at the 2 and 1, I mean, at the 1, but these are the 2 tough positions for me, Jake. Like, I don't know what they're going to do at the 1 and 2 positions. I think we've assumed Tre Holloman, but I know Copeland has been outstanding, I've heard, in summer workouts and leading into fall camp. And I just think he gives you a totally different look at that point guard position, because you know this, Wade, like Kevin Keatts, wants to switch 1 through 5.
Yeah.
Well, for those Wolfpack fans out there, think back to when Kevin Keatts was doing it and you would get caught with Michael O'Connell on a 4 or a 5, or Breon Pass or Markel Johnson. It just wasn't ideal. Whereas if you have a 6'6" guard playing the point guard position, well, you don't worry about that at all, right? Like that's a switch. You're perfectly fine. We go back to the NCAA tournament last year. There were times where Quadir Copeland was guarding Ian Shefflin from Clemson in the post.
And looked comfortable. I mean, and didn't look out of place at all. Right.
And so I think that element opens the door for that. But I still wonder, do you lean into your initial outlook? And I think for NC State, when they first constructed this roster, it was Tre Holloman, I would say Matthew Abel, Terrence Arceneaux, Darrion Williams, and then Ven-Allen Lubin.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I'll say this on the caveat of the Quadir Copeland side of things is I wonder how much like the ability to respond to things that happen throughout the course of a game impacts your starting lineup. And for me, you know, I coach high school basketball, and I look at a piece like Quadir Copeland and I start to wonder, well, is he more valuable coming off of the bench given that you can react to something that happens in the game? Like say, you know, somebody picks up a couple of fouls early and you're able to adjust your lineup in a way that it makes sense having him come off the bench. Like maybe it is Holloman that picks up a couple fouls early and you can just hot swap him in and he's running point guard. Or maybe it's a guy that's at a 3 or 4 position and it's just you're able to respond a little bit better. But I just think when you look at a starting lineup, like if he gets gassed in those first 5 to 6 minutes and you can't make that chess piece move to react to something that's happening in the game, it might put you at a slightly higher disadvantage.
Yeah, he gives you more versatility coming off the bench. That's actually what I like about the guys I didn't include in that lineup, right? When you talk about Quadir Copeland and the versatility he provides, Musa Sanya and the versatility he provides, we've heard they feel like they can play him from the 3, 4, or 5 positions. Jerry Dean, to me, is like the ultimate bench piece. Like I just love bringing him off the bench with his shooting ability because – we've talked about it at times over the years. You have to be able to go to your bench and find scoring and find shooting. Because, you know, when you get to that first TV timeout and teams start subbing, it's a big deal when you can bring in a guy like Dean who can go out and knock down 2 threes for you, who can go out and get offensive rebounds for you, who can score. And they've got multiple guys like that. I mean, we didn't have Paul McNeil in that starting lineup. I mean, think about being able to bring in Paul McNeil and Jerry Dean with a guy like Musa Sanya off the bench, who will give you that defensive stability. And so I think the lineup I gave you also maybe best utilizes your bench early on, and it gives you still plenty of upside coming off the bench, because I feel like the teams that separate themselves in college basketball, it's not necessarily the starting lineup. I mean, obviously they've got great players in their starting lineup, but where I feel like teams take that next step is when you sub. And we saw it a ton last year with NC State. When you went to your bench and they were simply better there, that 4-point lead for them becomes a 10-point lead, or your 4-point lead now becomes a 3-point lead for them.
And I'll say with the bench pieces, what I think, as I've reflected on what State did in the portal and bringing in a guy like Matthew Abel, is you think about continuity. And I think what I've struggled with at times with NC State and watching other programs across the country is, especially with your big man group, is when you have 2 kind of different types of guys, right? And they sub in for each other. Not only is that player having to step in and perform, but the guys around him have to adjust in how they're trying to defend. You think about like a DJ Burns and a Middlebrooks when they were subbing in and out for each other. Like your philosophy has to change a little bit in the game. It feels grinding sometimes. Like the game style and the flow of the game just changes so much. And you look at a piece like Sanya getting brought in, and what I think is ultimately going to be one of the biggest boons of that is that the continuity between pieces is going to be similar. It's like if Ven-Allen Lubin starts and Sanya's coming in for him, like they're similar enough to where things aren't drastically changing. Whereas if Abube was going to be your primary second big, like it probably changes a bit, like how you defend, how you're playing offense, and now that those guys are so similar, like you can do that. Or even Darrion Williams and Jerry Ding, like, you know, some of the versatility that they bring, like your offense can keep rolling. All of your guards seem to be able to shoot the ball handle. It can do things like those guys can hot swap in for each other in and out. I just think the style of play is going to be fluid throughout the game. Like it's going to be some good continuity of what you're trying to accomplish, and you don't have to make quick little decisions and adjustments that can grind your offense and make you slow down.
Well, I think that's why this roster feels so well constructed, right? You have a lot of pieces to where they complement. Not only do they complement each other from a positional standpoint across the board, but even within positions, right? You think about Matthew Abel and Paul McNeil and how they play. You mentioned it with Sanya. I think Sanya and Ven-Allen Lubin are two very similar players. Both of them, I think, can stretch you out to the perimeter, can rim run, can pick and roll, can play the dunker spot. I think you give an edge defensively to Sanya. You'd probably give an edge, I think, maybe a little bit offensively to Ven-Allen Lubin. And you just kind of mesh those guys together. But what I believe is going to ultimately decide how high this team's ceiling is going to be what you get from your stars. Right. I mean, and that's the case, I think, with every program out there. I mean, Duke was what Duke was last year, not because of their bench, not because of their starting lineup, but because Cooper Flagg carried them and was a star. And that's why I go back to Darrion Williams. We know NC State heavily invested in Williams out of the portal, and he was one of the top players in the transfer portal. Some people consider him the top player in the transfer portal. And so when you invest like that in a player and you give him that opportunity, a lot's going to ride on him. Because I don't know where you're at on this, Jake. I think for State, he's kind of the one guy. If I had to pick one guy where you can't really replace him, it's pretty obvious. I think it's Darrion Williams, and it's not the scoring. I mean, a lot of folks. I was talking to my business partner Bryant about Williams, and he asked me, he's like, "Well, he was at Texas Tech, and they had another guy in JT Toppin who was really good. What makes Darrion Williams so special? It's not like he's scoring a ton of points. Like he just does everything. He's like the ultimate team piece to where if I need him to post up and play make, he can do that. If I need him to score, he can do that. If I need him to run ball screens, he can do that. He can be a floor spacer and play on the perimeter as a stretch four for you. He also defends at a really high level. It's not like this is a guy who's a deficiency on the defensive end. It's just a totality of what he brings to the table. You don't really see that on the college level. And not with his experience. No,
not at all. Like if there's a sure bet in college basketball, Darrion Williams is as close to that as you can possibly get. So for me, the answer is absolutely yes. Like he's the most critical part of NC State's season, and you can't replace what he does. You can't do it. But what makes him such a sure thing and why I have no concerns about him being that type of guy for NC State is just because of the versatility you mentioned. If you haven't watched it yet, I recommend everyone go back, watch the film room we did on Darrion Williams after the commitment, where we talk about his offensive versatility. And people talk about, I remember the conversation around LeBron James probably 5 to 6 years ago when people would say, if LeBron loses all his athleticism, he just becomes a really above average starting point guard in the NBA just because of everything else that he can do. And I'm not saying Darrion Williams is LeBron James, but when you think about it in the context of if Darrion Williams all of a sudden tomorrow becomes a 20% 3-point shooter for whatever reason, like he just can't shoot anymore, he's still a highly valuable college basketball player. Like he can do so much else. Like he can go in the post. And to take it to a less extreme example, if he's going through a stretch where the shot's just tough, then he'll just go post up a smaller defender, or he's gonna facilitate for other players, or he's gonna work like off of a pick and roll situation. He can just, like, you don't have to rely on one aspect of his game for him to be effective. He can just do so much more than that. So I think the odds are stacked in his favor to contribute in a positive way, regardless of how he does it.
Yeah, he's going to be my preseason ACC Player of the Year. ACC basketball kickoff is the first week of October. That's my vote. I think it's, frankly, a no-brainer. I know other teams have brought in some talented freshmen, and sometimes those freshmen come in like a Cooper Flagg, and they're better than everybody else. I'm not banking on that with him because I think he's going to – not only is he talented enough, experienced enough, proven enough, I feel like Wade and the staff's going to give him the platform to do that as well, the platform to play the way he wants to play. And so I guess my next question for you on this before we get going is, you heard my starting lineup. I went with Tre Holloman, Matthew Abel, Terrence Arceneaux, Darrion Williams, and Ven-Allen Lubin. If you had to pick one of those guys that you do not think is going to be starting in the opener, who you would say wouldn't be starting in the opener, who would it be and why?
I would say Matthew Abel. And I get the buzz and the performance that he's put in the preseason, but you think about what I talked about earlier, just easy coaching decisions to make. Like, it still wouldn't shock me, like, if Allen Breed is healthy, to see him kind of in that role, just as someone that Will Wade probably explicitly trusts and like can fulfill different parts of the game. Like, I don't know. I think the jury's still out on that 2-guard spot and how it's going to shake. And there's so many players, like, maybe it's not Allen Breed, maybe it's Paul McNeil, maybe it's somebody else, but
maybe it's Arceneaux.
Maybe it's bigger. Maybe it's Arceneaux and Darrion slides up to the 3 and Dings at the 4, or Copeland. Who knows? But I think if one player would be, I still think the safe bet is for Abel to be a starting guard by the end of the season, just given his ceiling and trajectory. But early in the season, it's easy not to start a freshman. Like, if you have any reason not to start a freshman, it's easy to do that and make them earn it a little bit. Wouldn't shock me.
I think that's the one where that's the one where you can say, I can see Wade going and say, hey, you're a freshman. We're going with Paul McNeil, the sophomore. We're going with Allen Breed, or we're going with the older guy. You can earn it, and maybe we'll go that route. But we know State's really, really high on Matthew Abel. We know from a recruiting standpoint, this isn't a reason to play him, but from a recruiting standpoint, if he hits, it's ideal for you moving forward as a program, because you want to be able to show we can translate 5 stars into first-round draft picks. Like, that's what you want to be able to show from a recruiting standpoint now more than ever, because I think more than ever there's less development being made out of the high school ranks. So you need guys that can come in and be first-round picks.
Especially if they're fringe, kind of like where Matthew Abel was now, like a top 20 guy, and you turn him into a lottery pick. Like, that's a story that you can sell. I'll ask you this question before we hop on this, James. If you were having to put money on this, and we're taking Darrion Williams off the table, who do you think is NC State's leading scorer? Putting money on it. Can't choose Darrion Williams.
It's interesting. We did a IPS in 5 using Bart Torvik's analytics, and I don't know if you listened to that one or saw the analytics, but I believe he had Tre Holloman projected to be NC State's second leading scorer. And I don't know if I would project that role for Tre, because I think Tre's more of a playmaker anyways. So that it's a fascinating question, because I think the upside lies at the 2 position. I would probably say Ven-Allen Lubin for me if I had to pick the second leading scorer, because – I mean, the guy's been 12 to 13 to 14 points everywhere he's been. And I feel like that's going to be a good number next to Williams with what else you have on this roster. Right? I mean, if I were trying to slot projections for points, given the depth on this roster, this isn't a team I feel like is going to have like 2 17-point-per-game scorers or anything like that. I mean, you're going to have Williams probably be in that 15, 16, 17 range. You're probably going to have one more guy right around 11, 12, 13. And then I think you could have 3 to 4 to 5, between 7 to 11.
Yeah.
And so I feel like with the ease and the efficiency that Ven-Allen Lubin scores with around the basket, asking him to get 12 doesn't feel like a lot to ask.
And the space that he's going to have to operate in. Whoever the big ends up being for State, we project it to be Ven-Allen Lubin. Like, you think about all the shooting and playmaking that NC State can put on the floor, I think it's – and I'll say this about your answer, because I agree with everything you said. I don't want people to hear that and think, oh, NC State lacks high-caliber scorers, or doesn't have multiple guys that could average 15 to 17. I take it more as NC State has 9 to 10 guys who have the potential to average 12 to 15 a game. It's just going to be a matter of how that load gets divvied up and who's popping. And I mean, this could be a team where you have 5 to 6 guys averaging 10 plus a game. Easy. Yeah,
and it's the depth. I mean, the reason you don't have like let's be honest, if NC State didn't land Scotty Abube, it didn't land Musa Sanya, I'd be on here telling you Ven-Allen Lubin is going to be averaging 15, 16, 17 a game.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's not him as a player that has me slotting him in as 11, 12, 13. It's just what else you have around him. I think you can make the same argument at the 2-guard spot. If you just had to roll out, you didn't have any depth, and you had to play Paul McNeil there or Allen Breed there or even Matthew Abel, they're going to probably average 12, 13, 14.
Oh, yeah.
But with the amount of depth State has on this roster, I think Williams is the one lock I would project for that high-end usage and the high-end scoring. And so, look, it's a fun topic to talk about here as we work our way towards men's basketball and NC State's men's basketball season. A lot of options. And we know last year NC State, it felt like, Jake, going into the year, they had a lot of options, didn't work out in terms of the way they managed them. And look, it happens sometimes. Please don't take that as simply a critique on Kevin Keatts. Jake mentioned he's a coach. I've coached basketball. It's not easy. Like, to me as a coach, Jake, this is the toughest position to be in.
Yeah.
When you have, now I want to be in that position, right? Like, I want to have, as much ammo as possible, but it's a lot easier to manage when you don't have as much. And you can just say, okay, these are my 5 guys or 6 guys, and this is what we got.
Yeah. If you think about, like, if you were a mechanic and someone told you, here are the 2 situations you can be in, I'll give you exactly the number of parts that you need, but I'm going to take one part away, and you're just not going to have that. So it's almost impossible to build it right. Or I'm going to give you all the parts you need plus 50 parts, and you just got to figure out which ones you got to put together in the right way. So, I mean, you'd much rather be in that second situation because you can get the job done. It's just it's going to take some work to figure out what works with what, and that'll be interesting to see over the first few weeks of the season how things evolve and how minutes shake out, because I think you'll start to see that responsiveness from the coaching staff pretty early. Like, it's going to be a couple games where they're going to just see what happens because you're going to win those games, I feel like, but then rubber's going to meet the road and we'll see what happens.
NC State men's basketball season opener, couple weeks away for the Wolfpack. Like I said at the beginning, if you haven't done so yet, please subscribe here at Inside Pack Sports. Also, check out the website, www.insidepacksports.com, for the latest on NC State athletics.